The Gifts of the Princes by Ginzberg. When Moses called on the people to make their offerings for the erection of the sanctuary, it sorely vexed the princes of the tribes that he had not summoned them particularly. Hence they withheld their contributions, waiting for the people to give according to their powers, so that they might step in and make up the deficiency, and all should observe that without them the tabernacle could not have been completed. But they were mistaken, for in their ready devotion the people provided all needful things for the sanctuary, and when the princes of the tribes perceived their mistake and brought their contributions, it was too late. All that they could do was to provide the jewels for the robes of the high priest, but they could no longer take a hand in the erection of the tabernacle. On the day of the dedication, they tried to make partial amends for letting slip their opportunity by following the advice of the tribe of Issachar, renowned for wisdom and erudition, to bring wagons for the transportation of the tabernacle. These princes of the tribes were no upstarts or men newly risen to honor. They were men who even in Egypt had been in office and exposed to the anger of the Egyptians. They had also stood at Moses' side when he undertook the census of the people. They now brought as an offering to Moses 6 covered wagons, fully equipped, and even painted blue, the color of the sky, and also 12 oxen to draw the wagons. The number of wagons as well as of oxen had been set with purpose. The 6 wagons corresponded to the 6 days of creation, to the 6 mothers, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, to the 6 laws that the Torah prescribes exclusively for the king, to the 6 orders of the Mishnah, and to the 6 heavens. The number of the oxen corresponded to the 12 constellations and to the 12 tribes. Moses did not at first want to accept the teams, but God not only bade him accept them, he also ordered him to address the princes kindly and to thank them for their gifts. Moses now even thought the Shekinah had deserted him and would rest on the princes of the tribes, assuming that they had received direct communication from God to make this offering to the sanctuary. But God said to Moses, "If it had been a direct command from me, then I should have ordered thee to tell them, but they did this on their own initiative, which indeed meets with my wish." Moses now accepted the gifts, not without misgivings, fearing lest a wagon should break, or an ox die, leaving the tribe, or that unrepresented by a gift. But God assured him that no accident should occur to either wagon or ox. Yes, a great miracle came to pass in regard to these wagons and oxen, for the animals live forever without ailing or growing old, and the wagons likewise endure to all eternity. Moses then distributed the wagons among the Levites, so that the division of the sons of Gershon received 2 wagons, with the transportation of the heavy portions of the tabernacle, boards, bars, and similar things, whereas the former, having the lighter portions, had enough with 2 wagons. The 3rd division of Levites, the sons of Kohath, received no wagons, for they were entrusted with the transportation of the Holy Ark, which might not be lifted upon a wagon, but was to be borne upon their shoulders. David, who forgot to observe this law and had the ark lifted upon a wagon, paid heavily for his negligence, for the priests who tried to carry the ark to the wagon were flung down upon the ground. Ahithophel then called David's attention to the need of following the example of Kohath's sons, who bore the ark on their shoulders through the desert, and David ordered them to do the same. But the princes of the tribes were not content with having provided the means for transporting the sanctuary. They wanted to be the first, on the day of dedication, to present offerings. As with the wagons, Moses was doubtful whether or not to permit them to bring their offerings, for theses were of an unusual kind that were not ordinarily permissible. But God bade him accept the dedication offerings of the princes, though Moses was still in doubt whether to let all the 12 princes make their offerings on the same day, or to set a special day for each, and if so, in what order they should make their offerings. God thereupon revealed to him that each one of the princes of the tribes were to sacrifice on a special day, and that Nahshon, the prince of Judah, was to make the start. He was rewarded in this way for the devotion he had shown God during the passage through the Red Sea. When Israel, beset by the Egyptians, reached the sea, the tribes among themselves started quarreling who should first go into the sea. Then suddenly Nahshon, the prince of Judah, plunged into the sea, firmly trusting that God would stand by Israel in their need. 388. Nahshon's offering was 1 silver changer that had been fashioned for the sanctuary, the weight whereof was 130 shekels, on bowl of equal size, but of lighter weight, of 70 shekels, both of them full of fine flour mingles with oil for a meat offering. Furthermore, 1 spoon of 10 shekels of gold, full of incense, on young bullock, the picked of his herd, 1 excellent ram, and 1 lamb a year old, these 3 for a burnt offering, and a kid of the goats for a sin offering, to atone for a possible uncleanness in the sanctuary. These sacrifices and gifts Nahshon offered out of his own possessions, not out of those of his tribe. God's acceptance of the offerings of the princes of the tribes shows how dear they were to God, for at no other time was an individual allowed to offer up incense, as Nahshon and his fellows did. They also brought sin offerings, which is ordinarily not permitted unless one is conscious of having committed a sin. Finally, the prince of the tribe of Ephraim brought his offering on the 7th day of the dedication, which was on a Sabbath, though ordinarily none but the daily sacrificed may be offered on the Sabbath. 389. The offerings of all the princes of the tribes were identical, but they had a different significance for each tribe. From the time of Jacob, who foretold it to them, every tribe knew his future history to the time of the Messiah. Hence, at the dedication, every prince brought such offerings as symbolized the history of his tribe. Nahshon, the prince of Judah, brought a silver charger and a silver bowl, the one to stand for the sea, the other for the mainland, indicating that out of his tribe would spring such men as Solomon and the Messiah, who would rule over all the world, both land and sea. The golden spoon of 10 shekels signified the 10 generations from Perez, son of Judah, to David, first of Judean kings, all whose actions were sweet as the incense contained in the spoon. The 3 burnt offerings, the bullock, the ram, and the lamb, corresponded to the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whereas the kid of the goats was to atone for the sin of Judah, who sought to deceive his father with the blood of a kid. The 2 oxen of the peace offering pointed to David and Solomon, and the 3 small cattle of the peace offering, the rams, the goats, and the lambs, corresponded to the descendants and successors of these 2 Judean kings, who may also be classified in 3 groups: the very pious, the very wicked, and those who were neither pious nor wicked. On the 2nd day of the dedication appeared the prince of the tribe of Reuben and wanted to present his offering, saying, "'Tis enough that Judah was permitted to offer sacrifice before me. Surely it is not time for our tribe to present our offerings." But Moses informed him that God had ordained that the tribes should present offerings in the order in which they moved through the desert, so that the tribe of Issachar followed Judah. This tribe had altogether good claims to be among the first to offer sacrifices, for in the first place, this tribe devoted itself completely to the study of the Torah, so that the great scholars in Israel were among them. And then, too, it was this tribe that had proposed to the others that bringing of the dedication offerings. As this was the tribe of erudition, its gifts symbolized things appertaining to the Torah. The silver charger and the silver bowl corresponded to the written and to the oral Torah, and both vessels alike are filled with fine flour, for the 2 laws are not antagonistic, but form a unity and contain the loftiest teachings. The fine flour was mingled with oil, just as knowledge of the Torah should be added to good deeds. For he who occupies himself with the Torah, who works good deeds, and keeps himself aloof from sin, fills his Creator with delight. The golden spoon of 10 shekels symbolizes the 2 tables on which God with his palm wrote the 10 commandments, and which contained between the commandments all the particulars of the Torah, just as the spoon was filled with incense. The 3 burnt offerings, the bullock, the ram, and the lamb corresponded to the 3 groups of priests, Levites, and Israelites, whereas the kid of the goats alluded to the proselytes, for the Torah was revealed not only for Israel but for all the world, and a proselyte who studies the Torah is no less than a high priest. The 2 oxen of the peace offering corresponded to the oral and the written Torah, the study of which brings peace on earth and peace in heaven. 390. After Nahshon, the temporal king, and Nethanel, the spiritual king, came the turn of Eliab, the prince of the tribe of Zebulun. This tribe owed its distinction to the circumstance that it followed commerce, and through the profits thereof was enabled to maintain the tribe of Issachar, which, entirely devoted to study, could not support itself. The charger and bowl that he presented to the sanctuary symbolized the food and drink with which Zebulun provide the scholar tribe Issachar. The spoon indicated the border of the sea, which Jacob in his blessing had bestowed on Zebulun as his possession, and the 10 shekels of its weight corresponded to the 10 words of which this blessing consisted. The tow oxen point to the 2 blessings which Moses bestowed upon Zebulun, as the 3 small cattle, the ram, the goat, and the lamb, corresponded to the 3 things which gave Zebulun's possessions distinction before all others, the tunny, the purple snail, and white glass. 391. After the tribes that belonged to Judah's camp division had brought their offerings, followed Reuben and the tribes belonging to his division. The gifts of the tribe of Reuben symbolized the events in the life of their forefather Reuben. The silver charger recalled Reuben's words when he saved Joseph's life, whom the other brothers wanted to kill, for the tongue of the just is as choice silver. The silver bowl, from which was sprinkled the sacrificial blood, recalled the same incident, for it was Reuben who advised his brothers to throw Joseph into the pit rather than to kill him. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold symbolized the deed of Reuben, who restrained Jacob's sons from bloodshed. Hence the gold out of which the spoon was fashioned had a blood-red color. The spoon was filled with incense, and so too did Reuben fill his days with fasting and prayer until God forgave his sin with Bilhah, and his prayer was set forth before God as incense. As penance for this crime, Reuben offered the kid of goats as a sin offering, whereas the 2 oxen of the peace offering corresponded to the 2 great deeds of Reuben, the deliverance of Joseph and the long penance for his sin. 392. Just as Reuben interceded to save his brother Joseph's life, so did Simeon rise up for his sister Dinah when he took vengeance upon the inhabitants of Shechem for the wrong they had done her. Hence, the prince of the tribe of Simeon followed the prince of the tribe of Reuben. As the sanctuary was destined to punish unchastity among Israel, so were the gifts of the tribe whose sire figured as the avenger of unchastity symbolical of the different parts of the tabernacle. The charger corresponded to the court that surrounded the tabernacle and therefore weighed 130 shekels, to correspond to the size of the court that measured 100 cubits, of which the tabernacle occupied 30. The bowl of 70 shekels corresponded to the empty space of the tabernacle. These 2, the charger and the bowl, were filled with fine flour mingled with oil, because in the court of the tabernacle were offered up meat offerings mingled with oil, whereas in the tabernacle was the showbread of fine flour and the candlestick filled with oil. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold corresponded to the scroll of the Torah and the tables with the 10 commandments that rested in the ark. The sacrificial animals, the bullock, the ram, the lamb, and the kid, corresponded to the 4 different kinds of curtains and hangings that were used in the sanctuary, and that were fashioned out of the hides of these animals. The 2 oxen of the peace offering pointed to the 2 curtains, the one in front of the tabernacle, the other in front of the court, whereas the 3 kinds of small cattle that were used as offerings corresponded to the 3 curtains of the court, one to the north, one to the south, one to the west of it. And as each of these was 5 cubits long, so were 5 of each kind presented as offerings. 393. As Simeon, sword in hand, battled for his sister, so, by force of arms, did the tribe of Gad set out to gain the land beyond the Jordan for their brethren. Therefore did their prince follow Shelumiel, prince of Simeon, with his offerings. This tribe, so active in gaining the promised land, symbolized in its gifts the exodus from Egypt, which alone made possible the march of Palestine. The charger of the weight of 130 shekels alluded to Jochebed, who at the age of 130 years bore Moses, who had symbolical connection with the bowl, for he was thrown into the Nile. This bowl weighed 70 shekels, as Moses extended his prophetic spirit over the 70 elders. And as the bowl was filled with fine flour, so did Moses' prophetic spirit in no way diminish, because the 70 elders shared in prophecy. The 3 burnt offerings recalled the 3 virtues Israel possessed in Egypt, which were instrumental in their deliverance. They did not alter their Hebrew names, they did not alter their Hebrew language, and they lived a life of chastity. The sin offerings were to atone for the idolatry to which they were addicted in Egypt, so that God did not permit their deliverance until they had renounced idolatry. The 2 oxen of the peace offering corresponded to Jacob and Joseph, for whose sake God had delivered Israel out of Egypt. They brought, besides, 15 heads of small cattle as sacrifice, because God was mindful of his vow to the 3 patriarchs and the 12 fathers of the tribes, and released Israel out of bondage. 394. A special distinction was granted to the tribe of Ephraim, for God allowed their prince to make his offering on the Sabbath, a day on which otherwise none but the daily offerings were allowed to be offered. This distinction the tribe of Ephraim owed to its ancestor Joseph in recognition of his strict observance of the Sabbath as governor of Egypt. The gifts of this tribe represent the history of Jacob and of Joseph, for the descendants of the latter owed much to Jacob's love for his son Joseph. The charger alluded to Jacob, the bowl to Joseph, and as both these vessels were filled with fine flour mingled with oil, so too were both Jacob and Joseph very pious men, and the course of their lives ran evenly. The spoon symbolized Jacob's right hand, which he laid on the head of Ephraim to bless him. The spoon was filled with incense. Jacob laid his right hand upon Ephraim and not upon his elder brother Manasseh, because he knew that the former was worthy of the distinction. The 3 burnt offerings corresponded to the 3 patriarchs, whereas the kid of goats stood for Joseph, whose coat had been smeared with a kid's blood. The 2 oxen of the peace offering indicated the 2 blessings that the sons of Joseph had received from their grandfather Jacob, and the 3 kinds of small cattle that were offered as peace offerings corresponded to the 3 generations of Ephraim that Joseph was permitted to see before his death. 395. Joseph not only observed the Sabbath, he was also chaste, not to be tempted by Potiphar's wife, and he was faithful in the service of his master. God therefore said to Joseph, "Thou hast kept the 7th commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery, and hast not committed adultery with Potiphar's wife. And thou hast also kept the following commandment, the 8th, thou shalt not steal, for thou didst steal neither Potiphar's money nor his conjugal happiness. Hence there will come a time when I shall give thee the reward due thee." When hereafter the princes of the tribes will offer their offerings at the dedication of the altar, the 2 princes among thy descendants shall one after the other offer their offerings, the one on the 7th, the other on the 8th day of the dedication, as a reward because thou didst observe the 7th and the 8th commandments. The prince of the tribe of Manasseh now followed that of Ephraim, trying, like the preceding, symbolically to represent Jacob's and Joseph's lives. The charger, 130 shekels in weight, indicated that Jacob, at the age of 130 years, migrated to Egypt for the sake of Joseph. The bowl of 70 shekels corresponded to Joseph, who caused 70 souls of the Hebrews to migrate to Egypt. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold indicated the 10 portions of land that fell to Manasseh. The 3 burnt offerings corresponded to the 3 generations of Manasseh that Joseph was permitted to see before his death, whereas the kid of the goats recalled Jair, son of Manasseh, who died childless. The 2 oxen of the peace offering indicated that the possessions of the tribe of Manasseh were to be divided into 2 parts, one on this side the Jordan and one beyond it. The 3 kinds of small cattle for peace offerings corresponded to the triple attempt of Joseph to influence his father in favor of Manasseh, whereas the 5 head of each indicated the 5 daughters of Zelophehad, the only women who, like men, received their shares in the distribution of the promised land. 396. As the sanctuary stood first in Shiloh, Joseph's possession, then in Jerusalem, Benjamin's possession, so did this tribe with its sacrifices follow Joseph's tribes. The charger signified Rachel, the mother of Benjamin, who bore him to Jacob when he was 100 years old, and in memory of this, as well as of Benjamin's attainment of 30 years when he came to Egypt, the weight of the charger amounted to 130 shekels. The bowl indicated the cup Joseph employed to discover his brother's sentiments toward Benjamin, and both vessels, charger and cup, were filled with fine flour, for both Joseph's and Benjamin's lands were found worthy being cited for God's sanctuary. The spoon of then shekels of gold full of incense corresponded to the 10 sons of Benjamin, all of whom were pious men. The 3 burnt offering corresponded to the 3 temples erected in Jerusalem, Benjamin's property, the Temple of Solomon, the Temple of the exiles returned from Babylon, and the temple to be erected by the Messiah. The sin offering, the kid of the goats, points to the building of the temple by the wicked King Herod, who atoned for his execution of the learned men by the erection of the sanctuary. The 2 oxen of the peace offering corresponded to the 2 deliverers of the Jews that sprang from the tribe of Benjamin, Mordecai, and Esther. The 5 heads each of the 3 kinds of small cattle for a peace offering symbolized the triple distinction of Benjamin and his tribe by 5 gifts. The gift of honor that Joseph gave his brother Benjamin 5 times exceeded that of all his other brothers. When Joseph made himself known to his brothers, he gave Benjamin 5 changes of raiment, and so too did the Benjamite Mordecai receive from Ahasuerus 5 garments of state. 397. In his blessing, Jacob likened Dan to Judah. Hence the tribe of Dan stood at the head of the 4th camp of Israel, and their prince offered his gifts before those of Asher and Naphtali. Jacob in his blessing to Dan thought principally of the great hero, Samson. Hence the gifts of this tribe allude chiefly to the history of this Danite judge. Samson was a Nazirite, and to this alluded the silver charger for storing bread, for it is the duty of a Nazirite, at the expiration of the period of his vow, to present bread as an offering. To Samson, too, alluded the bowl in Hebrew called Mizrach, creeping, for he was lame of both feet, and hence could only creep and crawl. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold recalled the 10 laws that are imposed upon Nazirites, and that Samson had to obey. The 3 burnt offerings had a similar significance, for Samson's mother received 3 injunctions from the angel, who said to her husband Manoah, "She may not eat of anything that cometh of the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing." The sin offering, which consisted of a kid, called in Hebrew seah, corresponded to the admonition given to Samson's mother, not to shave his hair, in Hebrew seah. The 2 oxen corresponded to the 2 pillars of which Samson took hold to demolish the house of the Philistines, whereas the 3 kinds of small cattle that were presented as offerings symbolized the 3 battles that Samson undertook against the Philistines. 398. The judge must pronounce judgment before it be executed. Hence, too, the tribe of Asher, the executors of justice, followed Dan, the judges. The name Asher also signifies good fortune, referring to the good fortune of Israel that was chosen to the God's people, and in accordance with this name also do the gifts of the prince of the tribe of Asher allude to the distinction of Israel. The charger, 130 shekels of silver in weight, corresponds to the nations of the world, whom, however, God repudiated, choosing Israel in their stead. The bowl of 70 shekels corresponds to the 70 pious souls of whom Israel consisted when they moved to Egypt. Both vessels were filled with fine flour. God sent his prophets to the other nations as well as to Israel, but Israel alone declared itself willing to accept the Torah. This nation accepted the spoon of then shekels of gold filled with incense, every man among them being willing to accept the 10 commandments and the Torah. The 3 burnt offerings corresponded to the 3 crowns that Israel received from their God, the crown of the Torah, the crown of the priesthood, and the crown of the kingdom, for which reason also golden crowns were fashioned on the ark in which the Torah was kept, on the altar on which the priests offered sacrifices, and on the table that symbolized the kingdom. But the highest of all is the crown of a good name, which a man earns through good deeds, for the crucial test is not the study of the Torah, but the life conforming to it. For this reason also there was a sin offering among the offerings corresponding to the crown of good deeds, for these alone can serve as an expiation. The 2 oxen indicate the 2 Torah that God gave his people, the written and the oral, whereas the 15 peace offerings of small cattle correspond to the 3 patriarchs and the 12 fathers of the tribes, for these 15 God had chosen. 399. As Jacob blessed after Asher and the Naphtali, so too did these 2 tribes succeed each other in the offerings at the dedication of the tabernacle. Naphtali, Jacob's son, was a very affectionate son, who was ever ready to execute his father's every command. The prince of the tribe of Naphtali followed his ancestors' example, and by his gifts to the sanctuary sought to recall the 3 patriarchs and their wives. 1 silver charger, the weight whereof was 130 shekels, symbolized Sarah, who was unique among her sex in her piety, and who almost attained the age of 130 years. A silver bowl for sprinkling blood recalled Abraham, who was thrown far away from his home. The weight of the bowl was 70 shekels, as Abraham also was 70 years old when God made with him the covenant between the pieces. The charger and the bowl were both filled with fine flour mingled with oil, as also Abraham and Sarah were imbued with a love for good and pious deeds. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold alludes to Abraham as well, for Abraham conquered the evil inclination and resisted the 10 temptations, whereas the 3 burnt offerings and the sin offering corresponded to the offerings made by Abraham at the covenant between the pieces. The 2 oxen for the peace offering indicate Isaac and Rebekah, whereas the 3 kinds of small cattle allude to Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, but the sum total of the offerings of these 3 species was 15, corresponding to these 3 and the 12 fathers of the tribes, 400. Apart from the significance that the offerings of the tribal princes had for each individual tribe respectively, they also symbolized the history of the world from the time of Adam to the erection of the tabernacle. The silver charger indicated Adam, who lived 930 years, and the numerical equivalent of the letters of Karat Kesef, silver charger, amounts to the same, corresponding to the weight of 130 shekels. Adam begat his son Seth, the actual father of the future generations, at the age of 130 years. The silver bowl alludes to Noah, for, as it weighed 70 shekels, so too did 70 nations spring from Noah. Both these vessels were filled with fine flour, as Adam and Noah were both full of good deeds. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold corresponded to the 10 words of God by which the world was created, to the 10 sephirot, to the 10 lists of generations in the scriptures, to the 10 essential constituent parts of the human body, to the 10 miracles God wrought for Israel in Egypt, to the 10 miracles Israel experienced by the Red Sea. The 3 burnt offerings were meant to recall the 3 patriarchs. The kid of goats indicated Joseph, the 2 oxen corresponded to Moses and Aaron, the 5 rams to the 5 distinguished sons of Zerah, Zimri, Ethan, Heman, Calcol, and Dara, whereas the 5 goats and the 5 lambs symbolized the 5 senses of mankind, by means of which the existence of things is determined. The sum total of the gifts of the 12 princes of the tribes had also a symbolical significance. The 12 chargers correspond to the 12 constellations, the 12 bowls of the 12 months, the 12 spoons to the 12 guides of men, which are the heart that bestows understanding and insight, the kidneys that give counsels good as well as evil, the mouth that cuts all kinds of food, the tongue that renders speech impossible, the palate that tastes the flavors of food, the windpipe that renders possible breathing and the utterance of sounds, the esophagus that swallows food and drink, lungs that absorbs fluids, the liver that promotes laughter, the crop that grinds all food, and the stomach that affords pleasant sleep. All the silver of the vessels that weighed 2,400 shekels corresponded to the years that had passed from the creation of the world to the advent of Moses in the 40th year of his life. All the gold of the spoons, the weight of which was 120 shekels, corresponds to the years of Moses' life, for he died at the age of 12401. The different species of animals offered as sacrifices corresponded to the different ranks of the leaders of Israel. The 12 bullocks to the kings, the 12 rams to the princes of the tribes, the 12 kids of the goats to the governors, and the 12 sheep to the government officials. The 24 oxen for a peace offering corresponded to the books of the scriptures and the divisions of the priests, and were also meant to serve as atonement for the 24,000 men, who, owing to their worship of Peor, died of the plague. The 60 rams of the peace offering corresponded to the 60 myriads of Israel's fighting hosts, the 60 he-goats to the 60 empires, and the 60 he-lambs to the building of the second temple that measured 60 cubits in height and 60 in width, 402. The gifts of the 12 princes of the tribes were not only equal in number, but also in the size and width of the objects bestowed, every tribe making exactly the same offering to the sanctuary. None among them wished to outrival the others, but such harmony reigned among them and such unity of spirit that God valued the service of each as if he had brought not only his own gifts, but also those of his companions. As a reward for this mutual regard and friendship, God granted them the distinction of permitting them to present their offerings even on the Sabbath day. 403.